What's so hilarious, and I guess I shouldn't be surprised because they always accuse you of being exactly the way that they themselves are, is anyone who asks questions or disagrees is woke now. Have you noticed this? The woke right? So you're like, I'm not sure that we should have a war with Iran right now. And like, it seemed like there were a lot of problems here. And like people I know are dying of drug ODs. Shut up, racist, you're woke. It's like, wait, what? Or people who are clearly working on behalf of a foreign country accuse you of working on behalf of a foreign country. It's so amazing.
Tucker Carlson had former Fox News host Clayton Morris on his show, on his podcast, and it was an hour and a half of neocon bashing. It was incredible. And before we get to all the different elements of that conversation, which by the way covered the lies that persuaded Americans to support the preemptive war in Iraq, there was also a conversation about how neocons are actually liberals. I actually want to discuss that in a moment as well. I do want to address what you just heard in that clip because I too have been accused of being woke because I'm against supporting Israel based on identity politics, and I'm also against clearly what they're doing in Gaza and what they're doing in the West Bank. And so who called me woke? Well, Konstantin Kisin, who's one of the hosts over at Trigonometry, that's also a podcast. I was responding to criticism over my demeanor, how I handled myself on Piers Morgan's show yesterday. And I'm sorry, when you have an IDF spokesperson gaslighting the hell out of people and pretending like a genocide isn't a genocide, when you have him smiling and smirking as I'm talking about the slaughter of innocent people, I get a little offended by that. I get a little worked up. And so I wrote, polite debates with men who smirk as I bring up the slaughter of innocents is nonsensical, to which Konstantin Kisin says, woke is so back, baby, with a laughing emoji. So this whole thing about wokeness, I want to address it real quick. Wokeness is identity politics on steroids, okay? It's basically basing your opinion on the identity of the group that you're either defending or speaking out against. In this case, people like Konstantin Kisin, who, as far as I know, isn't American, isn't Israeli, but for whatever reason seems to be obsessed with providing cover for the genociders in Israel, thinks that it's woke to be concerned about said genocide, about the slaughter of innocent people. And what are you basing your opinion on other than the identity of the people that you are providing cover for, of the Israelis? For me, it doesn't matter if we're talking about civilian deaths on the Israeli side or the Palestinian side. Take a look at how I covered what happened on October 7th on this show. How enraged I was about the civilians that were slaughtered by Hamas, because those are human beings. I don't see them as any different than Palestinian civilians. But for whatever reason, for Konstantin Kisin, it's totally okay to value civilian lives on one side and just brush aside all of those tens of thousands of civilians who have been killed on the Palestinian side. That's identity politics on steroids. That's what's woke.
Yeah, so first of all, I think the whole conversation is nonsense, to be honest, because they just call whatever they're against woke. They're not even trying to make sense.
Which is what stupid people do.
Right,
yeah.
But now the problem for them is that when they do it against people that are also on the right, like Tucker Carlson and Marjorie Taylor Greene, they are exposed for being the dumbasses that they are. So they were oftentimes just as dumb when they accused everyone on the left of being woke.
Agreed,
and they'd say absurd things. Now this is slightly, it's a bit of a tangent, but it's a similar concept, which is they're like, oh, Kamala Harris is a communist and a Marxist. And you're like, she's a corporatist. She works for the corporate donors, which is terrible, but that's the opposite of Marxism and communism. Try to make sense, right? And so this woke thing is similar. They're like, oh, you're all woke. What does that mean, right? So in this case though, if woke has any meaning at all, it's identity politics gone wrong, right?
Yes.
And so, okay, well, you guys are saying that we're not allowed to criticize Israel because we're anti-Semitic. So that's a different way of saying bigot or racist, right?
100%, yes.
So you're shutting down the conversation with identity politics. So if woke has any definition at all, it's that. So, and by the way, that is also not uncommon. This happens way more on the right. where they're guilty of something and they do projection. And Israel's also the king of this. They're like, oh my God, the Iranians are killing women and children in Israel. Like, you just killed like 40,000 women and children in Gaza, right? And so they're like, that is the worst kind of terrorism. I'm like, I kind of agree, and that's why I'm bothered you guys did it more. But they just keep on going. And in this case, they're like, oh, you're anti-Semite and you're a bigot and your voice should be shut down and you shouldn't be allowed to ever criticize Israel. That's why I don't do identity politics. No, that is identity politics. And if anything is woke, that's woke.
Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's move on to, you're gonna love this, Cenk. This is totally your wheelhouse. Probably after we come back from this video, I should just leave because you're gonna love this and you're gonna wanna talk about it forever. They get into the inner workings of corporate media and how they drum up support for war. Take a look.
MSNBC, we learned, had a 2-for-1 booking, official booking plan. That meant 2 pro-war voices for every 1 anti-war voice. It's such an important piece of this to have that propaganda piece of this, the manufacturing of consent for war.
Yeah.
And we have, again, a long history of this. You don't do it without the newspapers. You don't do it without the television stations. You don't do it without the Fox News or the CNNs, the MSNBCs.
Totally right.
I mean, CBS changed the name of their show to Showdown with Saddam. I'm Clayton Morris, host of Showdown with Saddam. We haven't attacked them yet. But that's the name of my show. Welcome. We're replacing Phil Donahue with Countdown Iraq. Like, so you're framing all of this ahead of time. The propaganda is there ahead of time, so it's all being laid out. It becomes an inevitability that we are going to attack.
Exactly. The show should have been called, "What the hell does Saddam Hussein have to do with 9/11?"
Go ahead, Cenk.
Yeah, 100%. Well, that's what we were saying on the air on the Young Turks before the war began and after the war began. So, and Anna's right, because this is literally chapter 5 of my book, Justice is Coming. It's called The Matrix, and it's about how corporate media is the #1 weapon for corporate rule. So whenever corporate interests are aligned, you will have MSNBC, CNN, and Fox News all agree. And we showed you a pretty spectacular case of that yesterday when we showed you all 3 cable news shows going, boy, Donald Trump, way to attack Iran. Same exact thing they did before the Iraq war. Now, if you're wondering why, well, there's a couple of reasons why. So as I explained in the book, and I mentioned Phil Donahue that Clayton Morris just mentioned there as well. What MSNBC did back then was anyone that was on the air that was against the war, they took them off.
Yeah.
Phil Donahue was their #1 rated show. They took him off the air because he was against the Iraq war. Ashley Banfield was this new star that they had stolen from another station. They were so proud of her. She covered 9/11, was a big up and coming star. She did a speech explaining the downsides of war. She didn't even state an opinion, but she just explained war is ugly and terrible, etc. She did that speech in Kansas off the air. They're like, that's it. Not only was she taken off the air, this is the amazing part. They wouldn't let her out of her contract so that she couldn't say that on anyone else's air. And then they moved her office into a closet so that everyone in the building can see, if you speak out against war, you're gonna get stuffed into a closet.
It was so sick.
Okay.
It was so sick. It was so sick. I remember.
And then Jesse Ventura was on the show, and Jesse says a lot of wacky things, right? But he also says some things that are true, and that could happen. Same with Tucker. Tucker says a lot of wacky things, and he's right about Israel and war in this case, right? So, but Jesse explained something that I know is true because his co-host on the pilot for his MSNBC show was Ben Mankiewicz, my co-host at the time on the Young Turks, right? They gave him MSNBC gave him a $2 million contract, okay? Then after they gave him the contract, they realized he was anti-war. So they said, forget it, keep the money and we just don't go on air, okay?
Wow.
So now why did MSNBC do that back in the day? At the time, it was owned by GE that predominantly made its money as a defense contractor, okay? Which they never ever revealed on air. GE also made a killing in rebuilding Iraqi infrastructure. So they made money destroying the infrastructure and making the infrastructure. That's why a TV was a tiny piece of their corporation. And that's why later they sold MSNBC. They didn't really care because it had gotten the job done. It served its purpose of marketing for their really profitable parts of GE, which is war making, right? And so a lot of those defense contractors are also advertisers on cable news.
Yes.
That's another incentive. Plus the lying politicians are the #1 advertisers on cable news. Because for example, in this election cycle, we spent $16 billion. Most of it went into mainstream media. So all those politicians are their clients, their sponsors, their brands that they're backing. So those politicians are owned by the military industrial complex, AIPAC, big drug companies, etc. So when they go and lie and say, oh, we want war is great, they go, oh, this is our top client. They want war, we want war. Yes, war is great. You showdown with Saddam. So that's how that sausage gets made.
So I want to go to the next clip in regard to Tucker Carlson getting reprimanded when he worked over at CNN. Before he worked at Fox, he did work at CNN. He ended up getting fired. And he talks about one of the things he did that got him into a lot of trouble. Let's go to D3.
I made the mistake of reading Osama bin Laden's manifesto on CNN. Not an endorsement of Osama bin Laden, obviously.
Right, but it's news.
Well, I just think it's important to know why people do things. You can disagree completely, but I think it's important to be honest about other people's motives. And so I read this, and maybe it's all made up or whatever, but can you trust Osama bin Laden? No. But I think, do I like Osama bin Laden? No, obviously. But I'm an American, but I think it's important to know why, or at least what he said about why he did it. And the two reasons, there are a number of reasons, but the two big ones were you've got US forces on the Saudi Peninsula, two most holy cities in Islam, Mecca, Medina, like that's offensive to me. And the second reason was you're in critical support of Israel. So I read this on the air at CNN. Whoa, shouldn't have done that. I was immediately denounced as an anti-Semite.
So he worked over at CNN between 2001 and 2005. Those were like my high school years, and I was not watching cable news, so I didn't even know that that happened. Do you remember that?
Yeah, and so if you reference Osama bin Laden's manifesto, you were going to get called an anti-Semite. Now that doesn't, of course, that doesn't make any sense. You're not
endorsing it.
I read the Unabomber's manifesto. That doesn't make me a bomber. I wanted to know why he did it.
Right.
I'm in the news business. We're supposed to find out why they did it, right? So that's why it's very curious when news organizations say, don't do the news. Don't tell people why he did it. It could be that he did it for a terrible reason. It makes us hate him more, not less, right? And it doesn't matter, he killed 3,000 Americans, we're gonna hate him anyway, right? And what a weird thing to say that reading why he did it makes someone an anti-Semite. What? Why are those two things connected? Oh, you're telling on yourself. What they're accidentally saying to you is, if you find out why bin Laden did it, it's because of we're supporting Israel. Then you'll start to wonder, wait, why are we supporting Israel? And not that you'll agree with bin Laden, but it'll open up that question. And we don't want anyone thinking about that question. We want everyone to support Israel. But wait, you're a news organization. Why do you care about everyone supporting any country? Imagine if they were all like, no, we have to make sure that everyone is supporting Finland. You'd be like, that is awfully strange.
Yeah.
Right? If somebody spoke out against Finland, you better, they're gonna get a talking to. By the way, when I was on Current TV, and I said something against Israel or just slightly critical of Israel, I got a call from management. Now they didn't, they didn't, to be fair to them, they didn't take me off the air, they didn't reprimand me, they didn't do anything wrong, right? But I did get a call. And
wow, I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
Drums.
So but I got a lot of calls at MSNBC. So like what people don't realize is they think cable news is real because nobody told them that it was actors and it's all a play, right? What they don't realize is most of the anchors don't even write their own scripts. They're just actors. They show up, they read the script.
The final thing I'll get into that I thought was fascinating in this conversation, this is the last video, D6. Tucker talks about a phone call he received from the Murdochs after he got fired from Fox News. And to me, the conversation, how it went down and what was promised to Tucker gives you a sense of how politics and campaigning really works.
The Murdochs really hate Trump. Like, there's no one who hates Trump more than the Murdochs. I mean, I got fired in April of 2023. In May of 2023, they asked me to run for president against Trump and said they would back me. Obviously, I'm not running for any, I would never get elected anyway. Plus, I like Trump. I mean, that's the funny thing is I actually genuinely, I get frustrated. I'm frustrated now.
So hold on, I'm sorry. You just said that and they asked you to run for president against Trump, the Murdochs.
Yeah. Lachlan Murdoch said you should run for president. We'll back you. The whole thing, the whole
Fox News apparatus.
And not just Fox, but Wall Street Journal,
all of their papers, everything.
Absolutely, yeah, we'll back you.
And that came right from.
You should do that. I was already gone. They'd already canceled my show. I was still under contract, but they canceled my show. You should run. We support you. You should run.
We want to stop Trump.
Yeah. Well, he was running.
I thought that was interesting. Interesting for a number of different reasons. You can talk about the Murdochs obviously not liking Trump and wanting to, help a challenger to Trump beat him in the primaries, but also the conversation about that whole Fox News apparatus, right? The media apparatus, the Wall Street Journal editorial board, New York Post. I mean, he named all of them in that. What do you think about that?
I mean, first of all, if you don't know that Murdoch tightly controls those news organizations and he just has them repeat whatever he wants, you're a babe in the woods. It's nice to know you. I mean, hello, welcome to American media.
Let me just make one quick important distinction though. I think that in the case of the Wall Street Journal, the news side sometimes does break really good stories and it's different from the editorial side. The editorial side obviously is very right wing, the editorial board, but should be thought of as different from the news side.
Yeah, the New York Post doesn't have a news side. They claim to have a news side. Fox News doesn't really have a news side. They claim to have a news side. No, it's all propaganda. And so, that's not surprising. Number two, that's not surprising. Murdochs have been against Trump from day one. They never wanted Trump. Why? Because he's harder to control. So that's got upsides and downsides, right? It has a lot of downsides because he's a wild man and he doesn't even know what he's doing, right? And it leads to instability, etc. But the one upside for the rest of us that Trump has is that, well, it's harder for Rupert Murdoch to control him. It's harder for the neocons to control him. It's harder for Israel to control him. I don't know why Rupert Murdoch loves Israel, and I don't know why he loves war, okay? But he does. Those are two things that he cares most about.
Right.
And he's driven in that direction, not just in American media, but British, Australian media. He has been manipulating the whole world to be in favor of wars and Israel for whatever reason, right? And so that's why he's a little worried about Trump because all the other politicians are super easy to control, incredibly easy. And that's why he makes that offer to Tucker because he thinks, this Tucker guy, he's been with Fox News and I've given him tens of millions of dollars. If he's a good boy and he listens, maybe we can get rid of this Trump guy. Now, but when Trump did the bombing of Iran, Fox News flips immediately and they're like, what a beautiful strategic, brilliant move, brilliant. More war, yes, we love Trump, right? So then he goes for the ceasefire and then Fox is back to, I don't know. Okay.
I know, it's amazing. It really
and by the way, Sean Hannity is nothing but Murdoch's boy.
He is, yeah.
He's his little pet, okay? He's a good boy. Do more propaganda, little boy. And the show's like, oh yes, master, yes. What should I tell them today? Just put it in the script, I'll read it. That blockhead. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.